Okay, hello? Okay, so this is August the 5th, 2023. I just have a quick voice note that I really wanted to put down. I wanted to write it, but I felt it's probably best to jot it down. Sorry, I'm just watching our black church members, churchgoers chase their little boy, which is so adorable. But nonetheless, so basically what I'm saying is there are a group of 6 or so white evangelical pastors who have basically said, presidents, I'll read it here. It said that November 30th of 2020, a statement by 6 SBC seminary presidents who are white took aim at critical race theory, a cluster of ideas that began to take shape in the 1970s and 80s. They examined how institutional racism came to exist in American life and law and how it endures to the present. Said it's dangerous to view humans in conflict primarily through the lens of race or gender or sexuality instead of via scriptural concepts such as sin. And so one of the things that's pretty disingenuous about that is not that at the end of the day, these presidents have this sort of mindset. The problem is that if you look at American society, if you look at Canadian society, if you look at a lot of, I guess you could say, municipalities, provinces, cities, and states within America in particular, you have a system that didn't start as a racist system, but because of the slave trade, because of the transatlantic slave trade, what happened is people were able to have a system where they profited off of the back and work of others. And so because of that, what took place is that they put people into categories just to justify the slavery, just to justify people owning other people and having them do the work. And so when you have a society like that for close to 400 years, what transpires is you have systems in place that are set up by people that were not at the table, that have to live within that system. So a great example, let's say for 400 plus years, I didn't have access, or people that looked like me didn't have access to decide how our medical system, our education system, our scientific discoveries, when it came to art, when it came to fashion, when it came to business, when it came to commerce, when it came to banking, when it came to insurance and home ownership and education and loans, and every aspect of society was built and formatted without anybody that looked like you sitting at the table helping to make those decisions. So what we then have is a society when those people, i.e. black people or women, are allowed into it, it's already been set up, it's already been there. And that's where these Southern Baptist Convention leaders come up short, because to deny that there were advantages to, and not necessarily inherent advantages, but just advantages to being someone of a lighter shade, Caucasian, in the society that was made by Caucasians. It's like FUBU, for us, by us, and everybody else has to kind of find a way to fit their round shape into a square peg. And so the ideas of intersectionality talk about what it's like to exist within that system, where there were laws on the books that stop people from moving into certain environments and certain places because of the color of their skin, from receiving loans. Redlining was something that was very prevalent within that society. So to deny that existence, and then to deny that there's a real issue with that, is ignorance. And it's willful ignorance. And it's ignorance in due part because it allows you then to access the halls of power. If you're talking and thinking the way a lot of these Republican members want to think, then that's going to benefit your bottom line. And it's going to benefit the people who want to be a part of your church and your congregation. But what it does is it alienates the people that don't fit into that and that live that reality, where any black person worth their salt that was raised in America, who comes to Canada or comes to Australia or was born there understands inherently what it's like to have a couple strikes against you already, not because the society is there's laws now that say I can't live here, I can't live there. That's not the case. But the legacy and the remnants of the patriarchy in those societies are still there. And the people that were in charge of insurance and commerce and banking and insurance and education and everything else and large companies and big business, they will hire within their ranks and people that look like them. That's just human nature. And so if you already were behind the 8 ball and had a 400-year head start or a 400-year sort of catch-up that you had to play, of course you're going to be coming from it from a place of lack of resources, lack of ability to reach out to people and get the things you need. You have to go to the people that inherently don't look like you, depending on what society you live in. So when I'm reading about a sweeping recent statement by racial theory from Southern Baptist leaders has prompted a lot of these people, at least 4 black pastors, to publicly break from the denomination. This was written in the Washington Post 2 years ago. It makes perfect sense, right? It makes perfect sense because at the end of the day, who wants to be a part of something that does not recognize your autonomy, doesn't recognize your struggles, minimizes what your culture, your race, your people have gone through, and then tries to tell you that it's not that bad, or tries to bring you into an idea or an ideal that all you have to do is pull yourself up by your bootstraps and make it work. And there is some definite truth to that. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of things that various groups within the black diaspora need to talk about, need to work within to simply do better. But the reality of it is, when you're coming from a system, when you're coming from a patriarchy, a hierarchy, when you're coming from all of these areas that were already designed well before you got into the mix, right? We have to be very aware of how we voice those things. And it's entirely ignorant, willfully ignorant, and frankly quite stupid to think that people don't realize that there are, advantages. And I could even liken it to ableism, for an example. If you can walk and you have full control of your extremities and you don't have any ailments, society could really open up for you. But if you're in a wheelchair, if you suffer from any sort of neurological, psychological ailments or illnesses, life can be quite challenging. And that doesn't mean that society wants to hold you back or stop you, but it just means that it's built for people who have full function of their senses. And so we have to be inclusive to that. Inclusivity, diversity aren't swear words. They're not things that we need to constantly fight against. And I'm pretty sure that the majority of black people, I being one, do not want to own white people or have them in cages or turn it around and cause the same problems and issues that we saw so many years ago. That's just not the case. The reality is, if you want an inclusive society where everybody has a real fair shot, then certain things need to be considered. And I think we're talking about it in a Christian concept, in a Christian context. It's ridiculously problematic to state that if a person just acknowledges the truth and the actual reality that a lot of people will face, where it's not something that's inherently holding you back, but there are things that will stop you from progressing just due to the fact that you were born in the skin you're in. And depending on what your socioeconomic background is, you can have certain challenges. It doesn't mean you can't overcome them, but they are there. Whereas you wouldn't think of them if you were white. Great example. My wife told me this when I was asking her why people were so afraid of walking downtown. I'm a very large black individual, and on first sight, most people would probably just leave me alone, cross the street. There are some crazies who probably want to mess with you or whatever, but at the end of the day, I don't think about somebody trying to mess with me on the street. She said, the same way I feel about police when they are driving close to me and I haven't done anything wrong. I don't have any narcotics in the trunk or whatever, but I'm still at that area where I'm like, you know what? Based on history, something bad could happen. So I'm going to be cautious until they drive off or until my interaction with them is over and they're out of my space. That's something that I've grown up with, and that's the same space in which a lot of women feel when they are walking along. So everybody has some form of privilege depending on what setting you're in and where you're at. I say that again just to say that if churches in particular, religious institutions can't see that, recognize that, and come to terms and grips with that, then their alien population, the people that are coming to these churches that are, getting older, and that, within the next 20, 30 years won't be around, need to realize, hey, at the end of the day, if you want to bring in new blood, you have to acknowledge that there are differences. You have to acknowledge that what the systems we had that were built on stolen land. It was built on broken treaties here in Canada. Same with America. It was built on, slave labor. Recognize that, acknowledge that, and not run and hide from it. And then on the flip side, it doesn't mean that I, as a black person, have the right to accuse or to malign or to make fun of or to rip into people who are white, but did not own slaves. There's nobody alive right now that I associate with or in the communities that I live in that have owned people, that have willfully partaken in the transatlantic slave trade. That's just not a thing. And so if I'm going to look at somebody and say, oh, well, because of the color of your skin, you have undue advantages, that's just not the case. I know plenty of white people that are just a waste of skin walking around. So it's not based on it's not based on your color or your gender or anything like that, but it's just based on the facts. And the facts are there's a lot of things that have been built on policies and on policies and laws that were unjust and that did things that were wrong. So I just wanted to say this really quick. I wanted to write it, but I felt, let me just put this little voice note in here real quick and then I got to get going. But it's something where, you see several black pastors break away from the Southern Baptist Convention because of the tone deafness. And I think this is a problem, particularly within the Western church, where there's such a connection between politics and Christianity, between reading the Bible and how people view it when it comes to scripture and everything else, that it's starting to get that if you are conservative, you're automatically seen as Christian, then you're automatically seen as voting Republican or, here in Alberta for a conservative sort of party. And there's definitely different shades out there, and you can't just align yourself to one and think, job done, right? That's not the case. That's not how it works. So, I'll probably bring this to talk to text just to kind of put it out there. But I really felt that that's something that was kind of weighing on me, because if the church that you're a part of or the denomination you're a part of doesn't see that, then they're not very welcoming to you as a person. And it's very easy to say, well, we're all the same in Christ, we're all the same in Jesus, and that if we look at the world in the state of, oppressor and oppressed, that it's a Marxist sort of way of seeing things, and that's just not the case at all. What it is just seeing the world as it is. Seeing the power structures, wherever they may be, in whatever society you can think of that's holding them, and how to take care of that, how to look at it and be honest with it, and not try to put it in a space where we're trying to hurt people or talk down to people who had nothing to do with that whatsoever. And I think that's a real space where a lot of people within the faith need to reconcile with. It's not about feeling guilty. It's not about feeling sad about something you haven't done. It's not about thinking, oh, I need to do this, this, and this. But it's more like, hey, this is the reality for a large number of your congregants. And if you are unwilling to admit to that or to look into that or even to acknowledge it, you're not acknowledging their daily lived experience. It's all about the spirit, by and by, pie in the sky, Christianity and faith, which sounds great to people who don't have to go through the realities of racism and bigotry and, homophobia and misogyny and ageism and ableism and all the isms. That's a reality they live. That's a reality that they are a part of. You can't just wash that away under the rug because you don't share that same issue. And if you're unwilling to speak to it, talk about it, to exist within that space and really embrace it, then you're not embracing the people in your congregation. You're not embracing the people that come to your church and tithe and give and help and are a part of that. It just doesn't work. And they'll go elsewhere, or they'll just stop coming altogether, which is one of, and it's so that idea that people want to have their ears tickled and listen to what will appease them is just, I don't see that. It's just a reality of, hey, this is what I'm going through, and the church that's supposed to care about me doesn't care about this. And so in that, it's like, okay, well, I'll go somewhere else that will care about me, or that I can relate to, or that we can have shared interests and values and beliefs, and still, base it on scripture, but realize, hey, my reality as a Christian is going to be far different than yours, depending on where we are and how much money we make and those sort of things. And you can take that to any type of lines, from money to the family you were born into, to your experiences with politics and where you live and all that stuff. A person who was born into a two-parent household, both families working, both, college-educated professionals who have very little sickness and illness and have family support, who are, let's say, white, will have a very different experience moving in the world than somebody who's from a single-family household, raised in poverty, with a system that was not built or designed with their needs in mind. So that's just something I wanted to really spit out there. I wanted to write it, but I figured, okay, that'll take forever. I'm in this hot car, sweating my sack off, but I just wanted to say that, and then I'll probably, again, just transcribe this here and go from there. All right.